Welcome into the retooled and revamped Zoneheads podcast with me, Brandon Kravitz, and the hottest free agent in the game, my guy, Zach Blobner, my cohort for the past 7 years on the Fantasy Fix and the various projects that we have taken a dive in the past. This being the latest, and we're all pumped up about it. Great feedback on that first episode, and keep it coming. At Brandon Kravitz, at Zach on the mic is how you can find us. Zach has all sorts of news that covers the entire I-4 corridor and beyond. Whatever highway you could find yourself on in the state of Florida, we essentially have you covered. So, Zach, I know that you are boiling over with angles and topics, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And I mean, listen, this time of year is always great because of the holidays, but it's great because we get a ton of sports. And I think with the new college football landscape, that's only been amped up another notch, not to mention people throwing football games on Black Friday. I know it's the National Football League, but we're just getting our heavy helping and then some. It's essentially like the football gods said. We know that people at Thanksgiving like to go back for a second and a third helping. Let's do the same thing with sports. Let's give them that much more to gobble up. And again, we are in December now, but that doesn't mean it's slowing down by any means. And, you know, it's crazy because on the college football side, we'll start there as it does expand to 12 teams. We're going to see that first iteration in just about a few weeks. The biggest news, and there's a lot of it, is coming out of the Sunshine State. One of the big storylines being whether or not Gator fans or Miami fans are in a better place right now. Now, the Canes are 10-2, right? Like, they should be feeling good. Cam Ward's a Heisman type of player. I know they're coming off of a rough loss to Syracuse. Currently, they're 12th in the College Football Playoff Committee rankings. But at 10-2, Miami fans are in the dumps as if they're 2-10. On the flip side, the Gators at 7-5, coming off of a win against Mike Norvell's Knowles, where they planted the flag in the middle of the field. You're thinking Gainesville, they're about to be in the playoff. So it's just crazy, the dynamic, Brandon, between these two schools, despite their records and despite the years that both programs have had.
It's all about expectations, right? You know, when going into the season, if I told a Gator fan, and we had these conversations, if I said you win 7 games, you start looking at that schedule, go, that means we've got some impressive wins. I can actually take that. I made the joke before the season started that if Billy Napier got to 8 wins, they'd actually give the guy a raise. At 7, he just gets to keep his job, but at 8, he would have gotten a raise.
He still might get 8.
That's true. Yeah, if you count the bowl game. I was thinking regular season, but if you count the bowl game, you're right. Now, with Miami going into the season, they had to run the table and get to the ACC championship if they wanted to ultimately achieve their goal. And while we often overrate what the goals should be for the Miami Hurricanes, with the additions they made in the portal and getting that superstar quarterback in Cam Ward and the schedule they had in front of them, it wasn't unrealistic to say they should run the table. So 10-2 feels like a horrendous letdown, whereas for the Gators at 7-5, you feel like you've been lifted and reborn. And let's be honest, record aside, the Gators found their quarterback of the future, and that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, DJ Lagway. I mean, you want to point to one specific difference. The crazy part is as electric as he is and knowing he'll be back at the helm next season, the defense has played night and day different after the bye week too, which has helped the Gators get a bunch of these wins. I think the craziest part of this whole chat, though, is that these teams actually did start the season off against each other, where the Canes went into the swamp and won. So I ask you this, Brandon, if they replayed today on a neutral field, knowing how good Miami was overall this season, that they already beat the Gators, Graham Mertz at the time was at the helm, who do you think would be favored in that game, and who would you bet on if they played each other, let's just say, the next weekend?
That is such a good question.
We'll go neutral site. So, like, I don't know what that – let's just say they play in California because it's far enough away from Florida that, like, nobody's got an advantage.
You could have easily put this in my backyard. They've played neutral sites in Orlando.
We'll play at Camping World. Okay, I'm cool with that. Screw it.
The Gator fans, the Gator fans do outnumber the Hurricane fans, but there's at least close to a split. Yeah. In Cali, there's just no energy there. No one's going to the game.
It's at the Rose Bowl. We'll throw a little extra in.
Okay, that's fun.
So who do you think would be favored, and who would you bet on?
It's tough. That's really tough. I think I remember it. I vividly remember betting on the Gators then. I figure if I took them then, why get off of it now? The Gators feel like they're actually the better football team. I think the Gators rounded into form where I feel pretty confident saying they were on the top half of the SEC by the end of the year, the way that they were playing with DJ running the football, defense, and it seemed like Billy Napier had buttoned some things up. I can't really explain how god awful this team was in week 1 and then to see the transition at the end of the year. But I think I would take the Gators. Now, to lay the line on it, neutral site, I think Miami would still be favored, but I think it would be tight. I think it would be Miami -3, 3.5. And I would definitely be on Florida.
I was thinking Miami -4, and I similarly would take the Gators. I don't even need the points. I'd take a money line just because DJ Lagway in the defense. Like, it's a different team now than it was in September when these two teams clashed.
It'd be great if we could get a bowl game with those two and just actually get the rematch. And that's one of the reasons it's such a letdown for the Hurricanes. I was looking at bowl projections. Mm-hmm. They actually, it looks like based on the projection I was looking at, I think it was ESPN.com or whatever, they had Miami playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which is the new Camping World. Mm-hmm. That's the new Citrus Bowl.
Edible mascot, baby.
Yeah, apparently they're going to have 3 Pop-Tarts too. So this is going to be, I know. They're blowing it out. So it's going to be a big year for that. But it looks like Miami is going to play in that game against a team from the Big 12, probably like an Iowa State. And Florida is in the Liberty Bowl. What's the difference? You know, what's actually the difference between the Pop-Tart Bowl and the Liberty Bowl as far as how you feel as a fan? So a huge letdown for Miami. They wanted to be in the playoff. For Florida, there's the fact that they get to go to a bowl game that's not in Birmingham or something, I think is a win.
Yeah, no doubt. I think on that, you've had Napier's tenure where they haven't won a bowl game. They weren't even in one, was that last year? So I think, as crazy as it sounds, there's a little pressure on him to go out and get that 8th win and to say, our schedule was tough, but we were a damn good team. Man, it's so crazy. If they would have had Lagway the entire game against Georgia, I would have loved to see a different outcome potentially there. And then maybe at 8-4, maybe they're looking at an even better bowl game. But yeah, to your point, I don't think any of it ultimately matters. Like, Miami fans are going to feel how they feel about Cristobal regardless at this point the rest of their season. And I feel the same way. Gator fans, and that's the hardest dilemma to kind of figure out. We'll switch to coaching up in Tallahassee here in a second. But what's going on with the Florida program and Billy Napier, like, as one of the staunch, like, I don't trust Billy, I don't believe in Billy guys, you see all the recruits he's flipping. You look at the way they're playing. He's going to have a roster next year that should compete for an SEC title with Lagway at the helm. I still don't have faith in him, but, like, it's hard not to give him at least a little credit for the way they've finished this year and fought.
And it's just so expensive to move off of these guys. The second you have any glimmer of hope with a college football coach, you got to hang on to him if he's got years left. And it's a good reminder to whatever your team is listening to this podcast right now, it can change on a dime. There wasn't a Gator fan in the world that wanted to hang on to Billy Napier. And now everyone's like, hey, you know what? Let's see what old Billy's got.
We're calling him Billy Buyout now instead of Sunbelt Billy. And they're using the buyout money that they would have paid him on NIL and on recruits. So Great. I'm fine with that. In today's day and age, like, you're like, we don't want to pay this guy. We'll take the money you would have paid to buy him out, spend it on recruits. It seems like that's what Florida's doing, especially knowing with Lagway, they got a real shot next year. One coach that isn't sticking around, at least where he was coaching this season and recently, is Gus Malzahn. The Gus Bus, I guess, got a fresh set of tires and took his act up to Tallahassee, where he is going to be the offensive coordinator now for the Florida State Seminoles. And, man, I see Norvell's team obviously being awful this year. They were fantastic. As good as they were last year, they were as bad this year. To put that in perspective, 13-0, won their conference, probably deserved a spot in the 14 playoff, regardless of the quarterback injury with Jordan Travis. This season, they get 2 wins. They look awful in almost every game across the board. So they needed to make a change. Like, I'll credit it there. That being said, I hadn't been impressed at all with Norvell the seasons prior to last year at 13-0. I thought he was kind of like a lame duck type of coach and maybe turned it around. But watching this season, even though they didn't have the same roster, I mean, he's got to shoulder a ton of that blame. And then he pivots and thinks that Gus Malzahn is going to come be his new OC and fix things. Brandon, this is where I can't wait to hear what you have to say. I know you've been talking about it a ton on air in Orlando. You've had a first row seat to the Gus Malzahn experience from day one. down I-4 in Orlando with UCF. And we've talked about him a lot. Now he's taken his act up to Tallahassee, and I know you've got Florida State in your background as well. Man, like, what would your advice be to Florida State fans as he comes to town? And then on the flip side of that, what are UCF fans saying today?
Yeah, we're loaded here with this.
Did you gas up the Gus bus when it left town? Let's start there.
Yeah. I paid for the Uber. I didn't think it was a good hire when they brought him in. So I've been taking my victory lap for the last 48 hours on this. Gus never fit what UCF had become. They were the disruptor brand in the market. If you think about it from a business perspective, they were the Silicon Valley startup that did things differently. They had beanbag chairs in the office, open floor plan. Nobody's got an office with a door. That's what UCF felt like. And rather than continue on with that mode, Scott Frost, Josh Heupel, guys that were climbing the ladder of college football success, they went the easy route. Let's get a big name from a power program that didn't work out, and he can parachute on down with his palm tree button-down T-shirt on and retire in Florida. That's not what UCF had become. And Gus had his day in the sun, and he had Cam Newton to play around with, and then he inherited a great roster with Gene Chizik, and he had some success against Nick Saban. This guy is riding 3-5 versus Saban on his resume as if that's a reason that I should get excited. Gus Malzahn is the classic letdown coach the second you've got any sort of expectation. His record as a favorite was worse than his record as an underdog. Make it make sense. They were favored by 14 points against Colorado when they came to town, and they got blasted by this team. They were favored all year. They were favored by 10 against Utah, and they got blown out in that game at the end. Gus is the ultimate disappointment. Have fun with him in Tallahassee. Here's what you can get ready for. You want the message to FSU fans?
Yeah, listen up, Knowles, because I know there's some of y'all that think this is a good hire. I don't know if BK is on the same page.
Be prepared to abandon the forward pass. That would be that's the expectation that you should have. Gus Malzahn does not know how to generate a rock-solid passing attack in today's college football world. Running quarterback, getting multiple backs involved, he's good at that. UCF statistics offensively are so bloated by taking on FCS cupcakes at the start of the year, but the stats that you should care about in college football, what are your passing numbers? What's your third down conversion rate? How often are you getting penalized? What's your turnover percentage? All of those. Awful under Gus Malzahn. I think that this was Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell knows that he is this far away. My fingers are very close together from being pushed out of Tallahassee, and now he's hiring his buddies. I didn't realize this until after the hire. Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell go way back. Mike Norvell got his start on Gus Malzahn's staff as an OC at Tulsa. This was a long time ago. So they've got ties. I think Mike Norvell is doing him a solid. I don't think this was a hire based on merit. I think this is a hire based on the brotherhood.
The older I get, the more I hate when head football coaches hire their friends, because the track record of it not working out just becomes longer and longer. I want to read this to you before we move on to the National Football League and finish up with a little bit Orlando Magic after their loss recently to the Knicks. From FSU football, this is the headline a day or two ago when they announced Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator. Boom, a renowned offensive innovator with a championship pedigree. Gus Malzahn has been hired as our next offensive coordinator after overseeing a top 10 rushing offense and top 20 total offense each of the last 3 seasons.
I mean, it's just technically, I guess you could say that. He was an innovator. That was like 12 years ago. Shit changes.
I read that and I was like, man, y'all know how to paint a pig. All right,
It is amazing. I mean, the being the OC the year that Cam Newton was taking over college football has done has done so much for the Gus Malzahn bank account. I don't have any. I know it sounds like it. I feel like I can't say this enough. I don't have a personal problem with Gus Malzahn. I thought he was with the media. So maybe that's part of it. Like, he just never really was someone that you were like cheering for his success. He was just sort of there. Not somebody that wrapped their arms around those that covered him. And I don't need a pat on the back. I just need you to be mildly entertaining. And he wasn't. It just never seemed like he cared about any of that. I don't think he understands how the game is played, and he's used to that, that SEC life. I forget the whole point that I was making on this. I don't have a personal problem with Gus.
It sounds like you guys are besties.
I don't. I really don't. I just
you went off on such a tangent of why you don't like him.
It's
to explain that you do like him, that you got lost today. Look, I get it though, because covering teams and covering sports, if you're able to make any type of connection at all, you're going to usually give that guy just a smidge more of credit. But ultimately, winning and losing is what sways you one way or the other. That being said, when you're losing, if you're still good to the media, you can make it sound like on the mic it's not as bad, vice versa. If you're winning, but you're being kind of like cold to the media, you're not going to get as much credit. Again, overall, it's still the same picture, but there's a minor difference between how you're treated, and especially on the way out, what's being said about you. We still talk nicely about Jeff Scott from his USF days, and he was awful here, but he was great to us.
And that there are two different ways to look at this, and I think part of the reason I paused is that I don't think I was wording it right. I don't personally. Yes, it's nice when coaches wrap their arms around the media. Jamal Mosley does that. When I see head coach, the head coach of the Magic, he might genuinely not know who I am, but when I see him, he pretends like we're friends. That goes a long way. I like him on a personal level because of that, and I would be slower to try and run somebody like that off. That's just how personal relationships work. When you like someone, you're going to be kinder to them. But I don't expect coaches to do that. Now, I don't rub shoulders with Gus Malzahn. I don't cover UCF at a press conference level. I don't see Gus Malzahn ever, so I can't hold that against him. It's not like he's ever been rude to me. What I'm talking about is more of a charisma, something that makes the fan base endear themselves to that individual. Think of the most extreme example on the positive end is the Gators with Steve Spurrier. Mm-hmm. You didn't ever have to meet Steve Spurrier. He didn't ever have to shake your hand, which, by the way, germaphobe, he doesn't like shaking hands. Learned that the hard way.
Sure.
You don't have to meet him to have that appreciation. He's just entertaining. You like hearing him talk. He's got something interesting to say. Gus Malzahn was just he was a doorknob. I don't know how else to describe it. But no, I don't dislike him.
Nice ending there. Well, to that point, we will bump up into the National Football League. Honestly, one of the biggest critiques about Todd Bowles with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers out in the 8-1-3 is his lack of charisma. I mean, we've heard it nonstop since he got hired. And to your point, Brandon, like, again, I do think that affects how you're viewed, especially by the fan base. There's another layer to it as well, though, that I always bring up when it comes to Coach Bowles. At least what we see isn't what the players see. And a lot of players behind closed doors, and I'm not necessarily saying Gus was like this at UCF or anywhere else, but there is another relationship that coaches have with players that we never really see in that type of way that might be completely different. And Todd Bowles is beloved and has been since we've been covering him here in Tampa Bay by all of his players. He's a guy that gets a ton of respect. He doesn't have a ton of charisma, but apparently he does get loud at points in meeting rooms and like has a little bit more loudness and vocalness to him when nobody's watching with his guys and with his players when he needs to. That being said, they're at 6-6. The Buccaneers barely beat a Carolina team in overtime that started to play a little bit better. The Panthers just took the Chiefs recently to the same, finish line and weren't able to get the job done. But what I say is every week you're seeing, and it's been this way since last season, after the Bucs lose, Bowles needs to be fired by a lot of fans. After they win, Bowles saved his job, or Anthony Nelson with the fumble saved Bowles' job this week. And it's just like exhausting from a coverage standpoint, from a fan standpoint. Like, why do we have to have this guy's job on the line one way or the other, win and lose each week? I think for me, at least, especially in this scenario, I'm more of a like, we can talk about Todd Bowles and his security in this job at the end of the season. That doesn't matter right now. What does matter is this team at 6-6, not having the tiebreaker, but tied with the Falcons at the top of the NFC South and a soft schedule the rest of the way. Last week you and I talked about the Bucs, right? And not really necessarily controlling their entire own destiny because of those Falcons games, but they're in a good place all of a sudden at 6-6 with a soft schedule the rest of the way.
Yeah, things are looking up for them. And I think Todd Bowles is the perfect transition to the conversation we were having about Gus Malzahn, because they are similar in that way, where there isn't a charisma there that draws you in as a fan. And so it's easier to write somebody like that off. Bruce Arians was the opposite of that. Bruce Arians made you like him. He was a salesman on the mic, and you wanted to see somebody like that succeed. It's easier to dismiss a coach when you're not bought in on the way they communicate. I think that's just natural. And Todd Bowles had done an okay job. If they don't get to the playoffs last year, fans would have really been on him. He was on the short list. It's not like we're making this up. If you looked at odds lists a year ago of who's going to get fired, Bowles was towards the top of that list. But once you have results, all of a sudden your demeanor at a press conference doesn't matter. There's a reason Belichick got away with it as long as he did, because he was winning Super Bowls, so it didn't matter. He was dull. He wasn't interesting, but he won, so who cared? And Todd Bowles has now proven that he is a good coach. He gets the most out of his players. I don't think the record indicates how good this team is. They've dealt with so many injuries, and there's a clear revamp that needs to go on with the defense. Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded coach. He's got to get that side figured out. I'm confident that he can. But the fact that he doesn't get in the way of the offense, a lot of these defensive-minded coaches can hamper the progression of an offense, even if they're not the ones with their hands in the soup, so to speak. But Baker continues to get better. This wasn't just a Dave Canales thing. And I think you have to feel encouraged, not just about where they are as far as making the playoffs this year, but just where the organization is. I would go into next year feeling even more confident that what you saw a season ago wasn't a blip. That doesn't feel like a fluke anymore.
No, and again, we'll kind of see how they finish up this final stretch, but I had predicted them preseason to win 10 games. They're 4 wins away, and I'm pretty sure they still have 5 to go the rest of this month, and then the first one in January. If they go 4-1, they get to 10 wins. They'll probably be in the playoffs in some capacity, whether that's as a wild card somehow or as the division champ. And that's a step forward from last year with 9 wins and 8 wins the season prior. And they've been in that scenario, they've been a playoff team every season. So that's why for me, I'm like, we'll wait till the end of the year to talk about Todd Bowles, his job security, the job that he did.
How is that even and I guess just because that's like a default low-hanging fruit topic for fans to have and media alike.
Yeah.
Why is that even a question? I wouldn't even think about firing Bowles.
It's a question for the fans. I don't think it is a question inside one Buck. I don't think the Glazers, owners of the franchise, are like considering it in a way. I mean, obviously, if they skid and they finish like 6, if they don't win another game, or if they only win one more game, like then I think maybe it's a conversation. But to me, Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield are tied for this season and next, and they're going to kind of see it out next year. And then if it's bad, if they don't get in this year and then next year's bad too, they'll probably flip the switch and get a new quarterback and a new coach in 2026. I think fans are frustrated, and I've had this chat with so many Bucs fans. It's the charisma thing. It's the way he goes about his business. And then, if you kind of push him further, they'll be like, he's a defensive-minded guy. How are they giving up this many yards? And I think there's fairness to that. He's not perfect, but he's also able to dial up games defensively that help you beat a team like the Detroit Lions, who haven't lost since. Who help you beat a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who haven't lost since. The 2 probably best teams in the NFC. The Bucs beat them, and they did so, in a way where it wasn't like a fluke or at the end of the game. And Todd Bowles, whether it was the way he managed the entirety of his organization or coached, certainly helped in both of those games. I think too, a lot of Bucs fans bring up like, well, the Bucs had to move on from Dungy to get Gruden to get over the hump, and every single time I'm like, yeah, but Dungy went and won a Super Bowl in Indianapolis. And people are like, well, it's different. And I'm like, you can't say that attitude doesn't work and use Dungy as the example when he literally won a Super Bowl. And the greatest, as you mentioned, coach ever, Bill Belichick, has the most chill demeanor we've ever seen in any coaching role.
Yeah. It also depends. the roster that you've built is so important to this whole equation. And I judge coaches off of, are you getting more or less out of the talent that you're provided? And I feel like Todd Bowles, the last couple of seasons, I don't know how you could say he's getting less out of this talent. Okay, now what do you coach like in the biggest games? Well, he's beaten those teams. And then even last year in the playoff loss, they played the Lions to the bone. So I don't feel like he doesn't shrink in big games, and he gets the most out of his players. You just can't ask for anything more than that. And he's good at hiring assistants. That's another thing that I don't think gets enough. That doesn't get enough discussion when we talk about head coaches. Are you good at hiring your staff? Mm-hmm. That's really the job of a head coach. We focus so much on, is he an offensive guy? Is he a defensive guy? It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter, because if you're a head coach, you're a CEO. You need to be good at bringing in people that fill those holes. That's your job. It's not to be this all-knowing omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. Was it good? Was I on the right track with that?
It's just like with the first
I'm whipping out like Wizard of Oz.
You got to just roll through it.
You can't be expected to be great at everything, so you've got to fill your staff with the right people. And I think Todd Bowles has done a good job at that, whatever the word is.
Yeah, and then last thing on that note, like, he literally didn't have his staff in place the first year. Their worst record, by the way, because it was inherited from Bruce Arians. And he had to figure out how to replace Tom freaking Brady, and improved on that with a guy like Baker Mayfield, who was cast off. So again, we'll see how they finish this year, but they've got a good chance to not only improve again on their win total, but be a team that people, might be kind of afraid of in the playoffs, just because, again, the two teams I think we're going to favor in the NFC have already lost to the Bucs. By the way, the Eagles also lost last year to the Bucs in the playoffs. And like you said, they took Detroit to the wire. So we can say whatever we want. Fans can think whatever they want. The National Football League, especially on the NFC side, is not forgetting about Todd Bowles' Tampa Bay Bucs team, especially if they find their way into the dance, 6-6 right now. To that point, Brandon, comfortable with the Lions as the best team in the NFC. I mean, realistically, would you bet anybody in the playoffs to beat them money line? It's going to all probably go through Detroit.
If it's in Detroit, we're rolling through the Detroit. I can't see myself doing that. Philadelphia is rolling right now. I still think Detroit is better.
Okay, let me go again. And we love betting. Brandon, we're going to get to hoops and wrap things up here. And I know you got a nice tidbit tonight I already bet on. So to that point, who would you feel better betting money line if the playoffs started tomorrow to get to the Super Bowl? Detroit through the NFC or the Chiefs through the AFC? You got to bet a money line every game.
Okay, now with that, we're layering in the price that it would take to bet them money line. Is that part of the equation?
No.
I don't get even odds on this, right?
We're just going to say the payout's the same. So it's not
payout's the same. Okay.
Which is hypothetical, just for the sake of the conversation.
Because I can say confidently that if we're layering in the price of what that would actually cost, the answer is Kansas City easily, because Detroit's going to be against almost anyone they play. They're going to be close to or just above a touchdown favorite. So the return on Detroit to win the game is going to be minimal going through the playoffs. I even think Detroit hosting Philly is probably closer to like -5. So that would be a tough bet to make. Kansas City, because they've played in all these close games and there's still this disbelief, they're going to be like a field goal favorite at the most against whatever team they go up against in the AFC, assuming that it's one of the good ones. Like if they play Buffalo or who's someone else, like the Chargers.
I mean, Baltimore's got the roster if they can kind of get things going a little bit. If Justin Tucker can stop missing cakes, I think we're talking about Baltimore as a team that could,
I just kind of get the feeling like we're wasting our time with the AFC.
Isn't that crazy? Damn, I really was hoping you were going to be like heavy on Buffalo. I'll say preseason, like I picked Baltimore. I thought maybe they took the next step with Derrick Henry coming aboard. Love that roster. I give Lamar more credit than most people. And And then, Buffalo with Josh Allen, like I didn't think they were going to take as big of a step back as others thought. I didn't think they'd be as good or better though. And they certainly are, at least that. But even all that being said, and the Chiefs being what they've been, they got Pacheco back. They got Hollywood Brown back, right? Or they're about to. Kansas City's a team that like, they still got Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and there's still dudes on that roster. Like, I don't care what happens the rest of the way or what's happened already. Like, I'm going to comfortably bet Chiefs money line the entire postseason.
Yes, and their defense has been good the whole time.
Yeah.
No, there's always so much focus on Mahomes. Mahomes is great, but the reason that team is as good as they are, as consistent as they are, part of the reason they win these close games, it's not just Pat.
Yeah.
The opposing team is screwing up left and right. That's the defense that's causing that. Steve Spagnuolo is the best assistant coach in the NFL. And so, yeah, we can get all excited about Baltimore's roster and Josh Allen looks like a superhero. I have people telling me left and right, well, the Chiefs keep winning these close games. It's not sustainable. The Patriots did it for 10 years.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we've seen this. Come on, y'all. We're smart.
I know. I feel like we are setting ourselves up. I wonder what the line is on that. I might need to look at that. Maybe the best bet going into the playoffs is that the Lions play the Chiefs and just bet the matchup.
I think that payout, whatever it is, if you can get your hands on it, is worthwhile value-wise.
I'm looking it up now.
The only thing that derails that realistically, while you're trying to find that, the only thing that realistically might derail something like that, we've seen this from Jared Goff. Like, he turns into a pumpkin every once in a while. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's why the Rams moved on from him. Now, it happens very infrequently. And certainly they're able to win some games, even where that does happen with Jared Goff. I remember specifically he didn't have his best game against the Bucs. I mentioned that Tampa Bay beat Detroit in Detroit earlier this season. But I think that's the one thing in like Mahomes, that ain't happening. Mahomes ain't walking into the postseason in any round, in any capacity, and turn it into a pumpkin. Like, he could have one leg, we've seen it, and still go out there and ball. So I think that's the edge in terms of like the path for both of those teams, even though there are some other squads that in theory on paper roster-wise could knock them off. But for me, like Mahomes and the Chiefs, you want to talk about comfortability, betting to win each round of the playoffs as we project. Yeah. Come on. I've won money already too much in my life on Mahomes, and early on I lost enough to be like, I know how to bet this the rest of its career.
Oh, I love it. I'm so excited for people to doubt them in the playoffs.
Good.
It's going to be such a
push the line, baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what, Brandon? We're doing this all wrong. Everybody, the Chiefs are awful. Make sure that you're betting against them.
That's right.
Push that line.
Let's go, Bills.
Push it.
Circle the wagon. I couldn't find the matchup, but what you could do is the Lions are 3-1 to win the Super Bowl. The Chiefs are 5-1 to win the Super Bowl. Just sprinkle on both. You know, someone's got to win the game if they play each other.
Well, you could probably, I don't know if you could parlay, but you could bet the Lions to win the NFC and you're like championship, and you can bet the Chiefs to win the AFC.
I'm assuming that price. I think that the books are smart. I think that they
parlay it. So yeah, you wouldn't be able to you want to get that multiplier in.
You can parlay. That actually
championship winner.
That's actually the way to do it. You get that at 7-1. That's really good.
There you go.
No, the problem is that has to now in the other scenario, you get a little bit of a price crunch, but the Chiefs or Lions could win the Super Bowl and not play each other in order to do it. That's why. But still, I mean, that's not bad. I think I'm actually going to play this 7-1 for the Lions and the Chiefs to win the conference.
It's written in the stars, man. It's in the script. We're rolling. Let's go.
I like that. We're going to save that. Wait till we're done.
You like that bet? I like the bet you gave me pre-show, man. You gave me a little NBA action to wet my whistle with.
So I fancy myself a props analyst now, as I'm pumping out daily videos for rotowire.com and their various social channels. And the NBA season I love because I have content to work through every single day. I do baseball props during the MLB season. Doing that on a daily basis can be very difficult, but the NBA, feel like the bread is buttered there. And LeBron James, at the ripe old age of 39, I know what it feels like with these legs to be 39 years old. LeBron and I graduated high school the same year. Things are slowing down for your boy, and they're slowing down for LeBron. He's had a lot of miles on those tires. He's 0 for 19 over his last 19 three-point attempts. The first thing to go when you get old is the legs, And I know he's headed down to Miami to take on his former team. He's usually played well against them, but this is a father time situation, and they still have his 3-point line at 1.5. He hasn't made a three in several games. Got to take the under, and they have it priced nice and neat at -105, so you don't even have to lay any juice for it. Bet of the day.
I'm on it. I already, as soon as you told me, I didn't even look. I didn't even hesitate. I said, let's roll. Let's do it. And now I'm going to have a reason to watch that game tonight in another wise situation where I wouldn't have. That game not featuring the Orlando Magic. What's going on with the Hoops team? The last time we spoke about a week ago, they were hot. We were talking about how Franz has been so much fun to watch, and just like the dynamic of what him and Paolo might look like later this season. Obviously, the last game I got to catch was a loss to the Knicks where New York did cover. But where are you at right now in the Magic and how they're kind of rolling?
Yeah, and speaking of betting lines, that line is running. Before we hopped on together, the Magic were favored by 3 against Philadelphia. That line's up to 4.5. Who knows what it'll be by the time you're listening to this? But Joel Embiid's not going to play. They're on the second night of a back-to-back. But I think that this one's pretty simple. The Magic have figured out their progression has been a lot of fun to watch. They've figured out how to win games. Last year, they were a 5 seed in the East. This year, they started the season before last night's game. They were 15-7. They had won 12 of their last 13. Winning hasn't been the issue. They've figured that part out, even without Paolo Banchero. The problem is winning when it matters the most. Winning when the spotlight is on you. The Magic were the TNT game last night. They're at MSG, the mecca of basketball. This is a game to decide Group A in the in-season tournament. Decide for yourself how much you care about that, but it still matters a little bit. It's something. So this
Those
game
games count. Those games count.
Yeah, and its game was and it's 1-82. This game felt just a little bit more important. And for the last couple of seasons, the last 2, where this team has really turned around, where they fall short is when the spotlight is on them and the game means a little bit more. I'll take you back last year, the best example of this, also a TNT game. The Magic get like 2 a year at the most, so there's not a lot to pluck through. It'd be a very short sample size. It was when Shaq's jersey was retired.
Were
you in the building? You were in the building for that. Yeah, that's right. I remember.
I paid OKC cents. They ruined my night. I was like,
awful.
It was pumped.
And OKC is a really good team. So you had a good opponent, Shaq jersey retirement night, spotlights on you. The team had been playing great, and they fell completely flat. Last night, it was the exact same thing. This is what this team has to figure out. Win the games that are spotlighted. And until they do that, there's going to be a ceiling on their success. Obviously, they could have used Paolo last night. They would have lost that game with him. So I think it's an overblown storyline. What they lacked was defense. This is a defensive-minded team. Paolo's great. He's not a great defender. They just couldn't stop New York. That's a really good team, by the way. You want to bet some futures, I would take the Knicks to come out of the East. But they got to figure that out. And until they do, they're going to stall out in terms of the progression of things.
So let me ask you this, and then we'll wrap things up here then. To that point, I mean, this is a team that did get into the postseason last year, right? That now has some experience that they should be able to lean on. And even though they're not full strength and they don't have their best player, like you talk about the Magic kind of crumbling in these scenarios, like how long does it take to learn how to step up in those scenarios? Because I think the argument for me would be, well, if they didn't learn some of it or at least enough of it from last year's experiences, they might never learn it with the current iteration of this squad.
It's fair. That is something. Hopefully, they find themselves in this position more often. They have another TNT game coming up against OKC if they don't flex them out within the next couple of weeks. So and they're still in the in-season tournament. So those are sort of like pseudo playoff games. You can at least simulate that sort of pressure for yourself. They advanced as a wild card. There's 4 teams from each conference that move on. The Magic had enough of a point differential where they actually won the wild card, even though they got blown out by the Knicks. So they will have some opportunities to do this. I don't know how you get past it. I think it's a mental thing. They just have to figure out a way to barrel through that. Maybe it takes another playoff berth where they get to the postseason and then they start to put that together. But that right now seems to be the thing that's holding this team back. And hopefully they can figure that out sooner rather than later. If not, the trade deadline's in February. We can have that conversation on a different day.
And we shall, because that's all I got for you today, brother.
Beautiful. That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Zoneheads podcast. Please subscribe to this channel and download every episode in sight. The algorithm loves it. Also, a reminder that the Zoneheads Christmas party is coming up on December 20th at Hourglass Brewing on Curry Ford Road, the re-release of Zoneheads 35, that delicious and delectable IPA. We're back at it next week with another episode. Until then, I'm Brandon. He's Zach. See you next time, Zoneheads.